The road that led to the hostel did not appear on any official map. It curved away from the main highway like a forgotten thought, half swallowed by wild grass and leaning trees that seemed to whisper warnings to anyone who passed. Most travelers never noticed it. Those who did rarely chose to follow it. And the few who did were never heard from again, at least, not in any way that could be explained. It began with the sisters. No one knew exactly when they arrived in the region. The nearby town, small and tired, had no record of them moving in. Yet somehow, they were simply there one day, living in the old hostel that had been abandoned years earlier after a fire that authorities claimed had no survivors. The building had stood empty ever since, its charred bones visible through broken windows, its doors sealed by time and fear. But when the sisters came, the hostel changed. Lights glowed again at night. Smoke rose gently from the chimney. The front door, once boarded shut, now stood open, as if inviting the world inside. Travelers passing along the highway began to notice it, an unexpected refuge in an otherwise desolate stretch of road. And standing near the entrance were the sisters. They were always together, always smiling. The older one introduced herself as Eliza. Her voice was soft but carried strangely far, as though the air itself helped deliver her words. The younger sister, Mara, rarely spoke, but her eyes, dark, almost too dark, watched everything with unsettling intensity. They offered shelter. Just for the night, Eliza would say. You must be tired. The road ahead is long. Many travelers accepted. At first, everything seemed normal. The hostel was warm, clean, far too clean for a place long abandoned. The rooms were prepared, beds made with fresh linens, and a faint scent of lavender drifted through the halls. Guests were given hot meals, though no one ever saw where the food was cooked. The sisters were attentive, almost excessively so, ensuring their visitors lacked nothing. But there were rules. Eliza explained them gently, always with a reassuring smile. Please, do not wander after midnight, she would say. The building is old, and some areas are unsafe. Keep your doors locked at night, she would add. It is for your own protection. And no matter what you hear, do not open your door until morning. Most guests found these rules odd but harmless. Old buildings made strange noises, after all. Better safe than sorry. The first night was always quiet. The second night was when things changed. Guests began to hear sounds, soft at first, like footsteps echoing from distant corridors. Then came whispers, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to seep through the walls. Some reported hearing crying, faint and desperate. Others swore they heard laughter, children laughing, though no children were ever seen in the hostel. Doors would rattle gently, as though someone, or something, was testing the handle from the outside. And sometimes, in the dead silence between those sounds, there would be a voice. Let us in. Not loud, not forceful, just a soft, pleading whisper that seemed to come from right outside the door. Some guests ignored it, some did not. The ones who opened their doors were never seen again. At least, not as themselves. The town began to notice the pattern, though no one spoke openly about it. Travelers who stopped at the hostel rarely returned to the highway. Their vehicles were found abandoned days later, parked neatly along the roadside as if their owners had simply stepped away for a moment. Authorities were called more than once. Each time, officers visited the hostel, and each time they reported nothing unusual. The building appeared empty. Dust covered the floors. The rooms were in ruins. No signs of recent habitation. No sisters. No guests. But that was impossible, because just hours before, the place had been alive with light and warmth. One officer, a man named Daniel Reeves, refused to let the matter go. He had seen the abandoned cars. He had spoken to a survivor, a man who had fled the hostel in the middle of the night, pale and trembling, unable to form coherent sentences. They were inside the walls, the man had whispered. I heard them breathing. They were waiting. Daniel returned to the hostel alone. This time, the building was not empty. The lights were on. The front door stood open. And the sisters were there. Eliza greeted him with the same calm smile. Mara watched silently from behind, her gaze fixed on him in a way that made his skin crawl. You must be tired, Eliza said. Come in. Daniel hesitated, but he stepped inside. The warmth hit him immediately, unnatural against the cold night outside. The air smelled of lavender, and something else, something faintly metallic. Where are the guests? He asked. Eliza tilted her head slightly. We have no guests tonight. That's not what I've been told. Mara's lips curled into a faint smile, though she said nothing. You're welcome to stay, Eliza continued. See for yourself. There is nothing to fear. Daniel stayed. He kept his weapon close, his mind alert. He noted everything: the pristine condition of the interior, the absence of dust, the eerie quiet that seemed to press against his ears. Midnight came. The sounds began. At first, he thought it was his imagination. A faint creak in the hallway. A whisper too soft to catch. But then it grew louder. Footsteps. Dragging, uneven footsteps moving slowly past his door. He drew his weapon, his heart pounding. Then came the voice. Help us. It was weak, broken, filled with desperation. Daniel moved toward the door. Don't. Eliza's voice called from behind him. He spun around. She was standing in the corner of the room, though he was certain she had not been there before. You must not open it, she said gently. They are not what they seem. Who are they? Daniel demanded. Mara stepped forward now, her dark eyes gleaming. They are what remains, she said softly. The door handle began to turn. Slowly, deliberately. Daniel aimed his weapon at the door, his finger tightening on the trigger. Stop, he shouted. The handle stopped moving. Silence filled the room. Then, from the other side, a voice whispered his name. Daniel. His blood ran cold. He knew that voice. It was his partner, Mark, who had disappeared weeks earlier while investigating the same case. Open the door, the voice pleaded. Please, it's me. Daniel's hand trembled. It's not him, Eliza said calmly. It only knows what you want to hear. The voice grew more desperate. Daniel, don't leave me here, it's dark. They're coming, a second voice joined in. Then a third. Dozens of voices, overlapping, crying, begging. The door began to shake violently. Let us in. Daniel stepped back, lowering his weapon slightly. What is this place? He asked, his voice barely steady. Eliza's smile faded. This place, she said, is a doorway. Mara's eyes gleamed brighter now, almost reflecting something that wasn't there. Once, Mara continued, this hostel was filled with people. Travelers, families, children. Then the fire came. Daniel remembered the report. No survivors. But they didn't leave, Eliza said softly. Not all of them. The pounding on the door grew louder, more frantic. They are trapped, Mara whispered. Between what they were, and what they've become. Why are you here? Daniel demanded. Eliza stepped closer. To keep them contained, she said. To keep others from joining them. Daniel's mind raced. And the missing travelers. A pause. Then Mara spoke. Some doors, she said, are meant to stay closed. The door burst open. What stood beyond it was not human. Shadows twisted into shapes that barely resembled the forms they once had. Faces. Stretched unnaturally, eyes hollow and endless. Hands reached out, too long, too many, grasping for anything they could touch. Daniel fired. The shots did nothing. The shadows surged forward, and then stopped. Eliza and Mara stood between him and the darkness. Their expressions had changed. No longer welcoming. No longer gentle. Now, they looked ancient. Powerful. Terrifying. You were warned, Eliza said quietly. The shadows recoiled, retreating back into the hallway as though driven by an unseen force. The door slammed shut on its own, sealing them inside once more. Silence returned. Daniel stared at the sisters, his breath ragged. What are you? He whispered. Mara smiled. Caretakers, she said. Eliza stepped closer, her eyes soft again. You cannot tell anyone, she said gently. They would not understand. And if they came here, she glanced at the door. They would not leave. The next morning, Daniel was found walking along the highway, miles from the hostel. His weapon was gone. His report was incomplete. When questioned, he said only one thing. Some places, he muttered, are not meant to be found. The case was closed shortly after. The hostel no longer appears on any maps. But sometimes, on long, empty roads, travelers still see a light in the distance. A place to rest. A warm welcome. And two sisters waiting at the door, smiling. Daniel tried to convince himself it had been a hallucination. The official report he submitted was thin, almost empty, just enough words to satisfy procedure, not enough to explain anything. He avoided details. Avoided describing the door, the voices, the sisters. But memory doesn't obey reports. It stayed with him. In the following days, he found himself waking at exactly midnight. Every night. No alarm. No sound. Just a sudden, violent awareness, as if something had called him back from sleep. And every time, for a brief moment before full consciousness returned, he would hear it. A whisper. Come back. At first, he dismissed it as stress. Fatigue. His partner's disappearance had already taken a toll on him, and what he experienced at the hostel had only made things worse. That's what he told himself. That's what he needed to believe. But then things started to change. Small things. He would misplace objects, only to find them later in places he never would have left them. His front door, locked before bed, would sometimes be slightly open in the morning. Not wide, just enough to notice. One night, he woke up not in his bed, but standing in his living room. Facing the door, his hand resting on the handle, as if he had been about to leave. He didn't sleep after that. The whisper came again the next night. Stronger. Closer. Daniel. It wasn't just a voice anymore. It was familiar. And this time, he knew it wasn't his imagination. He grabbed his phone, scrolling through old case files, photos, anything that might ground him in reality. That's when he saw it, a picture taken near the highway days before his visit to the hostel. A photograph of an abandoned car. Mark's car. But something in the background caught his eye. He zoomed in. There, barely visible through the trees, was a faint glow. The hostel. But that wasn't what made his blood run cold. Standing near the edge of the frame, was a figure. Blurry. Distorted. But unmistakable. It was him. Daniel dropped the phone. No, he whispered. The timestamp on the image didn't lie. It had been taken 2 days before he ever went there. Before he ever met the sisters. Before any of this began. A sharp knock echoed through his apartment. He froze. Another knock. Slow. Deliberate. He moved toward the door cautiously, every instinct screaming at him to stop, but something deeper, something heavier, pulled him forward. Who is it? He called out. No answer. Just silence. Then, Daniel, his breath caught. That voice again. Mark, I know you're in there, the voice said, softer now. Please, open the door. Daniel's hand trembled as it hovered over the handle. It's not real, he whispered to himself. It's not real. But the voice, it sounded so broken. So real. You left me, Mark said from the other side. You walked away. I didn't. Daniel stopped, his voice cracking. I didn't know. You knew, the voice interrupted, sharper now. You saw it. You saw what was inside, and you still left. Daniel stepped back. No. The air in the room shifted. The temperature dropped suddenly, the warmth draining away as if something had opened a window to winter itself. You weren't supposed to leave, the voice continued, no longer pleading, now accusing. The door handle began to turn. Slowly. Just like before. Daniel stumbled backward, his mind racing. They said not to open it, he muttered. The handle stopped. Silence. Then, a different voice. Soft. Calm. Familiar. Eliza, you're remembering, her voice said gently, from inside the apartment. Daniel turned sharply. She was standing in the corner of the room, just like that night in the hostel. Unmoved. Unchanged. Mara stood beside her, silent as ever. How? Daniel's voice failed him. How are you here? Eliza tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. You never really left, she said. The words settled into the room like something alive. Daniel shook his head, backing away. That's not possible. I walked out. They found me on the road. They found what remained, Mara said quietly. A long silence followed. Daniel's heartbeat thundered in his ears. What does that mean? He demanded. Eliza stepped forward, her gaze steady. That night, she said, when the door opened, something crossed. Daniel felt the ground shift beneath him, not physically, but something deeper, something in his understanding of the world. You think you came back alone, she continued. But doors like that, they do not close so easily. Daniel's breathing became shallow. No, I would know, would you? Mara asked. The lights flickered. For a split second, the room around him changed. The walls darkened. The air thickened. And he saw it. Not his apartment. The hostel. Burned. Broken. Watching him. Then it was gone. Daniel collapsed to his knees. What did you do to me? He whispered. Eliza's expression softened, but there was something else beneath it now, something almost like regret. We tried to stop it, she said. We always try. Stop what? He shouted. Mara stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. The crossing. Daniel looked up at them, his vision blurring. The fire, it didn't destroy them, Eliza explained. It opened something, a place between. They became part of it, and it became part of them. And now, Mara added, it knows you. A loud crack echoed from the door. Daniel turned. The wood was splitting. From the inside, thin, black shapes began to push through the cracks, like fingers made of shadow. They followed you, Eliza said quietly. The door burst open. Darkness flooded the room, not just the absence of light, but something alive, moving, reaching. Voices filled the air. Dozens. Hundreds. All speaking at once. Daniel, come back, you belong here. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't respond. The shadows stretched toward him, twisting, forming shapes that almost looked human. Almost. Eliza and Mara did not move to stop them. This time, they stepped aside. Daniel's eyes widened. You said you were protecting people, he choked out. Eliza met his gaze. We protect the door, she said. Mara's dark eyes locked onto his. But you, she whispered, are no longer outside it. The shadows reached him, cold, endless. As they touched his skin, memories flooded his mind, not his own, but others. Screams. Fire. The moment the world split open. And in that moment, he understood. The hostel was never just a place. It was a threshold, and he had crossed it. The last thing Daniel saw before the darkness consumed him was the sisters, standing in the doorway, watching silently. Waiting. Days later, another car was found abandoned along the highway. Engine still warm. Doors slightly open. Inside, there was no sign of struggle. No sign of the driver. Only one thing left behind. A photograph. Blurry. Distorted. It showed the old hostel, standing quietly beneath a dark sky. And at the entrance, two sisters. Smiling. And beside them, a third figure. Standing still. Watching the road. Waiting for the next traveler. The photograph did not stay where it was found. It should have been logged as evidence, sealed in a plastic sleeve, filed away in some quiet archive where unsolved things go to be forgotten. That was the procedure. That was what always happened. But this time, it didn't. By the time the officer returned with an evidence bag, the photograph was gone. No wind. No open window. No one entering or leaving the scene. Just gone. The report mentioned it briefly. A missing item. Possibly misplaced. No further action required. But something had already begun. Miles away, in a different town, a man named Adrian Keller was sorting through a stack of secondhand books he had purchased from a roadside vendor. Old things interested him, forgotten objects, items with history, pieces that carried stories no one remembered anymore. He didn't notice the photograph at first. It slipped out from between the pages of a worn novel, drifting silently to the floor. Adrian only saw it when he heard the faint sound of paper against wood. He bent down, picking it up absent-mindedly. And then he paused. The image was strange. An old hostel, standing alone in the dark. Two women at the entrance. And a third figure, slightly behind them. Something about it felt wrong. Not in a way he could immediately explain. Just wrong. He turned the photograph over. Blank. No date. No names. But as he looked back at the image, he felt a subtle shift in the room, as if something had quietly taken a step closer. Adrian frowned, glancing around his apartment. Nothing had changed. And yet, he looked back at the photograph. For a brief moment, so brief he almost convinced himself it hadn't happened, the third figure seemed clearer than before. More defined. Watching him, Adrian exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Just my imagination, he muttered. He placed the photograph on his desk and returned to his books. But his focus was gone. Every few seconds, his eyes drifted back to the image. There was something about the sisters. Their smiles. Too perfect. Too still. As if they weren't expressions at all, but something fixed in place, like masks. Hours passed. Night settled in. Adrian hadn't realized how late it had gotten until the room darkened around him. The photograph remained on the desk. Unmoved. Waiting. At exactly midnight, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then steadied. Adrian froze. A faint sound echoed through the apartment. A soft knock. He turned slowly toward the door. Another knock. Gentle. Patient. His chest tightened. Who is it? He called out. Silence. Then, you must be tired. The voice was calm, soft, almost comforting. Adrian's breath caught. He didn't recognize the voice. And yet, something about it felt familiar. You've been working all day, the voice continued. You should rest. Adrian stood up slowly, his gaze fixed on the door. Who are you? He asked. A pause. Then, open the door, the voice said gently. We'll take care of you. His hand moved before his mind could stop it. Fingers brushing against the handle. Warm. Too warm. A sudden chill ran down his spine. Something wasn't right. He stepped back quickly. No, he said, more to himself than anyone else. No, This isn't real. The silence that followed was immediate. Heavy. Then, from the other side of the door, a faint sound. Not a voice this time. Breathing. Slow. Uneven. As if something stood there, waiting. Adrian backed away further, his heart pounding. His eyes darted to the desk. To the photograph. The image had changed. The third figure was no longer standing still. It was closer. Near the front. And its face. Adrian's breath hitched. It wasn't clear. Not fully. But it was becoming recognizable. Becoming him. No, he whispered. The lights flickered again. Harder this time. The temperature in the room dropped sharply. And then, a new voice filled the air. Low. Unsteady. Don't open it. Adrian turned. The voice hadn't come from the door. It came from behind him. From the reflection in the window. He stepped closer, his pulse racing. And there, in the glass, he saw someone standing behind him. A man. Pale. Eyes hollow. Clothes burned and torn. Adrian spun around, but the room was empty. No, he said again, shaking his head. No, 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 you can still choose. The voice came again. Closer now. He turned back to the window. The reflection was clearer. The man was still there. Watching him. You saw the photograph, the figure said. That means it saw you. Adrian swallowed hard. What are you? He asked. The figure tilted its head slightly. I didn't listen, it said. I opened the door. A long silence stretched between them. Adrian's throat felt dry. What happens if I do? He asked quietly. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, it slowly raised its hand, and pointed toward the photograph. Adrian followed the gesture. The image had changed again. The sisters were still there. Smiling. But now, the third figure was gone. In its place, the door of the hostel stood open. Darkness spilling out. Waiting. You don't disappear, the figure finally said. You arrive. The knocking started again. Louder this time. More insistent. Open the door, the calm voice returned. You don't belong out there. Adrian's breathing became shallow. The room felt smaller. Tighter. As if the walls themselves were closing in. You belong with us. The words echoed. Not just from the door, but from everywhere. From the walls. The floor. Inside his own head. He stumbled back, his eyes darting between the door, the photograph, the reflection. There has to be a way out, he said desperately. The figure in the reflection watched him in silence. Then, there is, it said. Adrian looked at it sharply. How? The figure's expression didn't change. You don't answer, it said. The knocking stopped. Instantly. Completely. Silence filled the room once more. Adrian stood frozen, staring at the door. Waiting. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Nothing. Slowly, carefully, he stepped away. The air began to feel normal again. The cold faded. The pressure lifted. Adrian exhaled shakily. It's over, he whispered. But deep down, he knew better. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. He turned toward the desk. The photograph was still there. Unchanged. The hostel. The sisters. The closed door. Waiting. Adrian stared at it for a long time. Then, with trembling hands, he picked it up. And without another thought, he burned it. The flames consumed the paper quickly, curling its edges, blackening the image until nothing remained but ash. Adrian watched until the last ember died. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. Only then did he believe he had stopped it. But far away, deep along that forgotten road, something shifted. The hostel stood in silence. Dark. Empty. For a moment. Then, a faint glow appeared in one of the windows. Then another. And another. The front door creaked open slowly. And standing at the entrance, the sisters. Smiling. Waiting. As if nothing had ever changed. As if something new had just begun. The road found him before he ever realized he was looking for it. For days after burning the photograph, Adrian tried to return to his normal life. He went to work, answered calls, spoke to people, but everything felt slightly out of place, like the world had shifted half an inch to the left. Conversations lagged. Sounds echoed too long. Reflections in glass surfaces didn't always match his movements immediately. And then there were the dreams. Every night, without fail. The same road. The same silence. The same distant glow. At first, he only observed it, as if he were watching through someone else's eyes. But each night, the dream pulled him closer. Step by step. Breath by breath. Until one night, he was no longer watching. He was walking. The gravel crunched beneath his feet. The air was cold, damp, carrying that faint metallic scent he couldn't quite place. The trees on either side of the road leaned inward, their branches forming a tunnel that swallowed the sky. And ahead, the hostel. Its windows glowed softly, just as they had in the photograph. Adrian stopped. "I burned you," he whispered. The building didn't respond, but the front door creaked open on its own. A warm light spilled out onto the road. "And then, you came back." Adrian's chest tightened. The voice was behind him. He turned slowly. Eliza stood a few steps away, her expression calm as ever. Mara stood beside her, watching. "You destroyed the invitation," Eliza said softly. "But that doesn't end the path." Adrian shook his head, stepping back. "This isn't real," he said. "I'm dreaming." Mara's lips curved into a faint smile. "Does it feel like a dream?" she asked. Adrian didn't answer. Because it didn't. Everything felt too sharp, too present. The cold air against his skin. The weight of his body. The sound of his own breathing. Dreams didn't feel like this. "Then what is this?" he demanded. Eliza gestured gently toward the hostel. "A choice," she said. Adrian let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Choice? You've been pulling me here since the moment I saw that photo." Eliza tilted her head slightly. "No," she said. "Something else did." Silence settled between them. Adrian's gaze shifted to the open doorway. Darkness moved inside it. Not empty darkness. Something deeper. Something waiting. "What happens if I go in?" he asked. Mara stepped forward, her eyes fixed on him. "You already know," she said. And he did. Not in words. Not in clear thoughts. But in the same way you know when something is wrong without needing to explain it. "You don't come back," he said quietly. Eliza's expression softened. "Not as you are now." Adrian swallowed hard. "And if I walk away?" This time, Mara answered immediately. "It will follow." The air grew colder. The faint sound of breathing echoed from somewhere behind him. Adrian didn't turn. He didn't need to. He could feel it. Close. Too close. "Why me?" he asked. Eliza's gaze held his. "Because you saw it," she said. "And because it saw you." Adrian clenched his fists. "That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters." The silence stretched. The road behind him felt wrong now, heavy, suffocating, as if something invisible blocked his path. The hostel, on the other hand, felt open. Waiting. Welcoming. "You're not stopping me this time," Adrian said. Eliza didn't move. Mara didn't speak. Neither of them tried to block his way. Because they didn't need to. Slowly, Adrian stepped forward. One step, then another. The closer he got, the warmer the air became. The smell of lavender returned. Faint, familiar, comforting. Just like in the stories he never heard but somehow remembered. He reached the doorway. Paused. Inside, the hallway stretched into darkness. But there were shapes now. People. Standing. Waiting. Their forms were clearer than before. No longer just shadows, but something in between. Faces that almost looked human. Eyes. That almost held recognition. Almost. "Do you hear them?" Mara's voice came softly from behind him. Adrian listened. At first, there was nothing. Then, a whisper. Faint. Broken. "Stay." Another voice joined. Then another. Hundreds. Layered. Endless. "Stay with us." Adrian's breath trembled. "They're not asking you to open a door," Eliza said quietly. "They're asking you to become one." Adrian closed his eyes. For a moment, everything went still. The voices faded. The cold disappeared. And in that silence, he understood something that hadn't been said. This place didn't trap people. It connected them, linked them, turned them into part of something larger. Something that didn't end. His eyes opened. Slowly. And without another word, he stepped inside. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the world behind him disappeared. The road, the trees, the night, gone. The door closed on its own. Softly. Final. Inside, the hallway stretched infinitely, shifting with every blink. The figures moved closer. Not aggressively. Not violently. Just gathering. Welcoming. Adrian felt something change inside him. Not pain. Not fear. Just separation. Like a thread being pulled loose from the fabric of who he was. Memories flickered. His apartment. The books. The photograph. Burning. And then, nothing. At the entrance of the hostel, Eliza and Mara stood in silence. The door remained closed for a long time. Then, it opened again. Slowly. And Adrian stepped out. But something was different. He didn't look confused. Didn't look afraid. His expression was calm. Still. His eyes, empty. He took his place beside the sisters. Mara glanced at him briefly. Then looked back at the road. Eliza smiled. Not warmly. Not coldly. Just knowingly. Far away, on a quiet highway, another traveler drove alone through the night. Tired, distracted, looking for somewhere to rest. And just ahead, a road appeared. Narrow, unmarked, easy to miss, but not impossible to find. The traveler slowed, hesitated, then turned. The road welcomed them. The trees leaned in, and in the distance, a soft glow waited. At the end of the path, the hostel stood as it always had. Lights on, door open, and 3 figures at the entrance now. Smiling, waiting, unchanged, as if they had always been there. As if they always would be. And somewhere, deep within the walls, the voices whispered, growing louder with every new arrival. Not asking anymore, not begging, just calling, endlessly, for anyone who could still hear them. The newest traveler didn't notice the change at first. He parked his car a few meters from the hostel, tired enough that even the odd stillness of the place didn't register as unusual. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. The night was quiet in that heavy, unnatural way that made sound feel optional rather than absent. He stepped out, and paused. Something about the air felt familiar. Not in a comforting way. In the way déjà vu feels when it arrives too late to be useful. The hostel stood ahead, glowing gently. Inviting. He frowned slightly. He was sure he had never been here before. And yet his feet started moving anyway. Inside, the hallway was warm. Too warm for a building this old. The smell of lavender lingered in the air, layered over something deeper, something like old smoke that refused to fade completely. Eliza stood at the reception desk. Mara stood behind her, and beside them, a third figure. The traveler slowed. Something about that third person made his stomach tighten. Not fear exactly. Recognition without memory. You made it, Eliza said softly, as if she had been expecting him personally. I think I took a wrong turn, the traveler replied, trying to smile. Mara tilted her head slightly. No, she said, you didn't. A silence followed. The traveler glanced around the lobby. It looked normal enough. Too normal. Clean floorboards, lit lamps, a guest book on the counter. But the book was already open. And on the page, his name, written in ink that still looked fresh. He stepped back slightly. I didn't sign anything, he said. Eliza smiled faintly. You didn't need to. The air shifted behind him. A soft sound echoed through the hallway. Footsteps. Slow. Unhurried. Approaching. The traveler turned his head slightly, but saw nothing. Yet he could feel them. Many guests arrived differently now, Eliza continued. Not all of them come through the road. The traveler's throat tightened. What does that mean? Mara answered this time. It means the road is only one way in. The footsteps stopped. Right behind him. He didn't turn. He didn't want to. Then what am I doing here? He asked quietly. Eliza stepped forward. You're remembering. That word landed strangely in his chest. Remembering what? Before he could ask, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. And in that brief interruption of brightness, the hostel changed. Not physically. Not obviously. But enough. The walls seemed closer. The air heavier. And the sound of distant whispering grew louder, like an ocean just beyond hearing range. The traveler finally turned around. The hallway behind him was full. Not with people in any normal sense. With shapes. Some almost human. Some not anymore. All watching him. Waiting. He staggered back. No. I just got here, he said. The third figure stepped forward. Now close enough to see clearly. It looked like him. Not identical. But close enough that the difference felt intentional. A version shaped by something that didn't fully understand what it was copying. You were here before, it said calmly. The traveler shook his head. No. The figure tilted its head. You always say that at first. A cold realization began to spread through him. He looked at Eliza. What is this place? He demanded. Eliza didn't answer immediately. For the first time, her calm expression cracked, just slightly. As if she were choosing words carefully. This is where things go, she said at last, when they are between leaving and arriving. Mara added quietly, and forget. The traveler stepped back again. I'm not dead, he said firmly. The figure smiled. It was not a comforting smile. It doesn't require death, it replied. The hallway behind him grew darker. The whispers sharpened. No longer distant. Now close enough to form fragments. His name. His memories. Things he hadn't thought about in years. Moments he had forgotten he forgot. The traveler covered his ears. Stop it. But it didn't stop. It never did. Eliza watched him with something like pity. We don't trap people, she said softly. We stabilize them. The traveler looked at her sharply. By erasing them, Mara shook her head. By completing them, a door somewhere in the hostel creaked open. Slowly, the sound echoed like a signal. And with it, the hallway behind him shifted again. The figures moved slightly closer. Not rushing, not attacking, just inevitable. The traveler's breathing grew uneven. I want to leave, he said. The third figure stepped closer. You already did, it replied. The traveler froze. Something inside his memory flickered. A road, a crash, rain, a moment of impact that he couldn't quite place clearly enough to hold onto. His knees weakened slightly. Eliza spoke gently. You come here in pieces, she said. And you leave the same way. Mara added, most people prefer not to notice the difference. The traveler's vision blurred. The hostel was no longer stable. It was shifting, breathing, like something alive. Why show me this? He whispered. Eliza looked at him for a long moment. Then said, because you're still deciding. The traveler laughed weakly. Deciding what? The whispering stopped. Instantly, everything went silent. Even the footsteps. Even the air. Eliza answered softly. Whether you want to remember everything, a pause, or become part of what remembers for you. The hallway behind him opened wider. Not physically, conceptually, as if reality itself had loosened. The traveler felt it then. The pull, not forceful, not violent, just absolute, like gravity discovering him personally. The third figure extended a hand. Not to grab him, just to offer. A choice shaped like imitation. Eliza's voice was barely audible now. Most don't choose. The traveler looked at the hand. Then at the hallway full of waiting shapes. Then at the sisters. Something in him cracked. Not in fear, but in exhaustion. Like he had been running without knowing it his entire life. He exhaled slowly, and took a step forward. Not away, not back, forward. The moment his hand met the other version of himself, the world didn't break. It softened, like something finally clicking into place. His thoughts scattered, not disappearing, but rearranging. The fear faded first, then the confusion, then the question of why he had ever been afraid at all. Eliza closed her eyes briefly. Mara turned toward the hallway. The figures inside it quieted. One by one, as if satisfied, as if waiting for something to settle. The traveler, no longer fully the traveler, stood still for a moment. Then looked up, and smiled. Not the same smile as before. Not forced, not afraid, just complete in a way that no longer required explanation. Eliza nodded slightly. Welcome back, she said. Outside, on the road, another set of headlights appeared in the distance. Moving slowly, searching, approaching the same bend, the same forgotten turn, and the hostel waited, as it always did. Lights on, door open. Patient. The headlights grew brighter as the new vehicle approached the turn. This one was different, not because of the car itself, but because of the hesitation behind the wheel. It slowed before it even reached the bend, as if something about the air ahead carried a warning that couldn't be explained in words. The driver checked the GPS. No signal. He frowned. Tried again. Still nothing. Ahead, the road curved into darkness, disappearing between dense trees that looked too uniform, too arranged, like they had been placed rather than grown. He considered turning back. For a moment, he almost did. But then he saw it. A faint glow through the branches. Warm, soft, impossible to ignore. The driver exhaled slowly. There must be a lodge or something, he muttered. And continued forward. The moment his tires crossed the invisible threshold of that forgotten road, the signal on his dashboard died completely. The radio hissed once, then fell silent. Even the engine sound felt different, muted, as if the air itself had thickened around the car. But he didn't notice that yet. Because the light ahead was growing clearer. The hostel came into view. Standing exactly where it shouldn't have been. Too intact for something abandoned. Too alive for something isolated. He slowed the car, parked, sat there for a few seconds, staring at it. Something about it made his chest feel tight, though he couldn't explain why. Then he saw them. 3 figures at the entrance. A woman in front with calm posture. Another beside her, silent and still. And a third. He blinked. The third one looked familiar. Like someone he might have seen in a dream he couldn't remember properly. The driver shook his head. Get a grip, he whispered. He stepped out. The night air hit him instantly. Heavier than expected. Thicker. Almost listening. He closed the car door behind him and walked toward the hostel. Each step felt normal, until it didn't. Halfway there, he realized something strange. The sound of his footsteps wasn't echoing. It should have been gravel, open space, quiet night. But there was nothing. No sound at all. Just silence absorbing him. He stopped for a moment. Looked back at his car. It seemed further away than it should have. Not physically. Just less certain. Like it wasn't fully committed to being there. He swallowed. Then kept walking. Eliza greeted him first. "You found us easily," she said softly. The driver hesitated. "I didn't even know this place existed," he replied. Mara watched him closely. "You did," she said. "Just not recently." The driver gave a nervous laugh. "That doesn't make sense." The third figure stepped forward. The driver froze. Because now he could see it clearly. It wasn't just familiar. It was him. Not identical. Not perfect. But close enough that his mind struggled to separate the two images. "What is this?" he whispered. Eliza gestured gently toward the entrance. "You're tired," she said. "Come inside." The driver didn't move. "I think I should leave," he said instead. Silence followed. Not dramatic. Not threatening. Just absolute. Like the world itself had paused to listen. Mara spoke softly. "You already left," she said. A cold feeling slid down the driver's spine. "I just got here." The third figure shook its head slowly. "No," it said. "You arrived again." The words didn't make sense. But they felt like they should. The driver stepped back. The ground beneath him felt unstable. Not physically. More like certainty itself was thinning. "What is this place?" he asked. Louder now. Eliza's expression didn't change. "This is where the road corrects itself," she said. The driver frowned. "That's not an answer." Mara tilted her head slightly. "It is to those who remember." A distant sound echoed behind him. Footsteps. Many of them. Approaching from inside the building. The driver turned sharply. But the hallway behind the sisters was. Covered his ears. "Stop it." But it didn't stop. It never did. Eliza watched him with something like pity. "We don't trap people," she said softly. "We stabilize them." The traveler looked at her sharply. "By erasing them." Mara shook her head. "By completing them." A door somewhere in the hostel creaked open. Slowly. The sound echoed like a signal. And with it, the hallway behind him shifted again. The figures moved slightly closer. Not rushing. Not attacking. Just inevitable. The traveler's breathing grew uneven. "I want to leave," he said. The third figure stepped closer. "You already did," it replied. The traveler froze. Something inside his memory flickered. A road. A crash. Rain. A moment of impact that he couldn't quite place clearly enough to hold onto. His knees weakened slightly. Eliza spoke gently. "You come here in pieces," she said. "And you leave the same way." Mara added, "Most people prefer not to notice the difference." The traveler's vision blurred. The hostel was no longer stable. It was shifting. Breathing. Like something alive. "Why show me this?" he whispered. Eliza looked at him for a long moment. Then said, "Because you're still deciding." The traveler laughed weakly. "Deciding what?" The whispering stopped. Instantly. Everything went silent. Even the footsteps. Even the air. Eliza answered softly. "Whether you want to remember everything," a pause, "or become part of what remembers for you." The hallway behind him opened wider. Not physically. Conceptually. As if reality itself had loosened. The traveler felt it then. The pull. Not forceful. Not violent. Just absolute. Like gravity discovering him personally. The third figure extended a hand. Not to grab him. Just to offer. A choice shaped like imitation. Eliza's voice was barely audible now. "Most don't choose." The traveler looked at the hand. Then at the hallway full of waiting shapes. Then at the sisters. Something in him cracked. Not in fear, but in exhaustion. Like he had been running without knowing it his entire life. He exhaled slowly. And took a step forward. Not away. Not back. Forward. The moment his hand met the other version of himself, the world didn't break. It softened. Like something finally clicking into place. His thoughts scattered. Not disappearing, but rearranging. The fear faded first. Then the confusion. Then the question of why he had ever been afraid at all. Eliza closed her eyes briefly. Mara turned toward the hallway. The figures inside it quieted. One by one. As if satisfied. As if waiting for something to settle. The traveler, no longer fully the traveler, stood still for a moment. Then looked up. And smiled. Not the same smile as before. Not forced. Not afraid. Just. Complete in a way that no longer required explanation. Eliza nodded slightly. "Welcome back," she said. Outside, on the road, another set of headlights appeared in the distance. Moving slowly. Searching. Approaching the same bend. The same forgotten turn. And the hostel waited. As it always did. Lights on. Door open. Patient. The headlights grew brighter as the new vehicle approached the turn. This one was different, not because of the car itself, but because of the hesitation behind the wheel. It slowed before it even reached the bend, as if something about the air ahead carried a warning that couldn't be explained in words. The driver checked the GPS. No signal. He frowned. Tried again. Still nothing. Ahead, the road curved into darkness, disappearing between dense trees that looked too uniform, too arranged, like they had been placed rather than grown. He considered turning back. For a moment, he almost did. But then he saw it. A faint glow through the branches. Warm. Soft. Impossible to ignore. The driver exhaled slowly. There must be a lodge or something, he muttered. And continued forward. The moment his tires crossed the invisible threshold of that forgotten road, the signal on his dashboard died completely. The radio hissed once, then fell silent. Even the engine sound felt different, muted, as if the air itself had thickened around the car. But he didn't notice that yet. Because the light ahead was growing clearer. The hostel came into view. Standing exactly where it shouldn't have been. Too intact for something abandoned. Too alive for something isolated. He slowed the car, parked, sat there for a few seconds, staring at it. Something about it made his chest feel tight, though he couldn't explain why. Then he saw them. 3 figures at the entrance. A woman in front with calm posture. Another beside her, silent and still. And a third. He blinked. The third one looked familiar. Like someone he might have seen in a dream he couldn't remember properly. The driver shook his head. Get a grip, he whispered. He stepped out. The night air hit him instantly. Heavier than expected. Thicker. Almost listening. He closed the car door behind him and walked toward the hostel. Each step felt normal, until it didn't. Halfway there, he realized something strange. The sound of his footsteps wasn't echoing. It should have been gravel, open space, quiet night. But there was nothing. No sound at all. Just silence absorbing him. He stopped for a moment. Looked back at his car. It seemed further away than it should have. Not physically. Just less certain. Like it wasn't fully committed to being there. He swallowed. Then kept walking. Eliza greeted him first. You found us easily, she said softly. The driver hesitated. I didn't even know this place existed, he replied. Mara watched him closely. You did, she said. Just not recently. The driver gave a nervous laugh. That doesn't make sense. The third figure stepped forward. The driver froze. Because now he could see it clearly. It wasn't just familiar. It was him. Not identical. Not perfect. But close enough that his mind struggled to separate the two images. What is this? He whispered. Eliza gestured gently toward the entrance. You're tired, she said. Come inside. The driver didn't move. I think I should leave, he said instead. Silence followed. Not dramatic. Not threatening. Just absolute. Like the world itself had paused to listen. Mara spoke softly. You already left, she said. A cold feeling slid down the driver's spine. I just got here. The third figure shook its head slowly. No, it said. You arrived again. The words didn't make sense. But they felt like they should. The driver stepped back. The ground beneath him felt unstable. Not physically. More like certainty itself was thinning. What is this place? He asked. Louder now. Eliza's expression didn't change. This is where the road corrects itself, she said. The driver frowned. That's not an answer. Mara tilted her head slightly. It is to those who remember. A distant sound echoed behind him. Footsteps. Many of them. Approaching from inside the building. The driver turned sharply. But the hallway behind the sisters was empty. Still empty. And yet, he could hear them now. Clearer. Closer. Not outside. Not inside. Everywhere at once. His breathing quickened. I don't understand, he said. The third figure stepped closer again. You will, it said gently. The driver looked at it. Really looked. And for the first time, he noticed something terrifying. It wasn't copying him. It was becoming him. As if the longer he stood there, the less difference there was between them. He stepped back sharply. No, he said. No, I'm not staying here. Eliza's voice softened. You don't need to stay, she said. You just need to stop leaving. The driver turned toward his car. For a moment, it seemed closer. Safer. Real. He ran. The gravel tore beneath his feet as he sprinted back toward it. Behind him, no one chased. No one stopped him. He reached the car, grabbed the handle, and froze. Inside the window, in the reflection of the glass, someone was already sitting in the driver's seat. Looking at him. Waiting. His breath caught. Slowly. He stepped back. The reflection smiled. But the car itself was empty. The driver staggered away. No, 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 he turned back toward the hostel. It looked closer now, closer than before, as if it had moved. Or he had. The sisters were still there, waiting patiently. The third figure stood between them now, perfectly still, watching him with his own eyes. The driver's legs gave out slightly. What do you want from me? He shouted. Eliza's answer came gently. We don't want, she said. We receive. Mara added, and you already arrived once. The driver shook his head violently. I've never been here before. For the first time, Eliza's expression changed. Not surprise. Not confusion. Recognition. You always say that, she said softly. The air shifted. The road behind him faded slightly. Not disappearing. Just becoming less certain. The driver looked around desperately. This isn't real, he whispered. The third figure stepped forward again. And yet, it said quietly, you are still here. The driver's voice cracked. What happens if I walk away? Eliza glanced at the road behind him. Then you continue, she said. A pause. But not alone. Silence. The driver stood there, trembling. Then slowly turned his head. The road behind him stretched endlessly. But now, something stood at the far edge of it. Watching. Waiting. He turned back toward the hostel. The doorway was open, warm light spilling out, and behind him, the footsteps returned. Closer than before. The driver closed his eyes. And took a step forward. Inside, the door shut softly behind him. And the road forgot another name.